What's up, YouTube? Welcome to another episode of Electronics Made Easy. This is episode 109, and today we're going to talk about wire. There are many types of wire, just like there are many types of almost everything that we use in the electronics field. We're also going to talk about color codes, and we're going to talk about the numbering systems of wires. So let's get started. There are two basic types of conductors. We use copper and aluminum most commonly. There are some exotic ones, of course. You can have a silver conductor, a gold conductor, those types of things, but that's rare. In everyday use, we're going to use copper and aluminum. And this copper and aluminum comes in many different sizes. And it can come in two different forms. It can come as a solid wire, or it can come as a stranded wire. In the picture you'll see a solid copper wire and a stranded aluminum wire. The stranded is more useful because it's much more flexible. It can withstand vibrations, those kinds of things much better than a solid wire can. A solid wire tends to break if it's in an environment where it's going to vibrate a lot, and it doesn't bend, and it's not nearly as flexible as the stranded wire is. Most often you're going to find solid wire used in houses. Occasionally you will find some aluminum solid wire in houses, but not very often because it's not as safe. It tends to corrode more and creates more of a fire hazard. It is cheaper, but it also carries some inherent dangers with it. It's called a type NM wire when you use wire inside of a house. And the ground usually comes as a bare wire solid conductor. The other two insulated conductors are the hot and the neutral, or AC return. This is a picture of what the insulated and bare wire look like. The insulated conductors in type NM wire are usually black and white for most uses in a home. This particular picture is of a size 12 AWG, which means American wire gauge, and it's type NM wire, and it is PVC insulated. They are both solid. In a house, typically the black is the hot and the white is the common or AC return. Now, why would you choose one over the other as far as stranded or solid? Solid conductors are much more rigid. They are not as easy to bend. They're not nearly as flexible. If they're in an environment where they tend to vibrate, they tend to break. And the stranded wire is much more useful in industry. It's flexible. You can route it anywhere. It's just easy to work with. It can withstand the environment with the vibrations. It handles the heat and the cold and everything else better than the solid does. So that's why we use solid and stranded. The solid, of course, is a little cheaper. This picture shows a solid number 12 conductor, which is what you would use in your house. And this is a stranded number 16 copper conductor. And both of these are very useful in their particular environment, but choose wisely. Stranded wire comes in a variety of configurations. It has many variations on the number of conductors within it. And the more conductors you have, the more flexible the wire is and the more bendable it is. Here's a couple of examples. This is 16 gauge stranded copper versus 20 gauge stranded copper. The 20 gauge is actually a smaller wire than a 16 gauge. The larger the number, the smaller the wire. This is type MTW, which is machine tool wire. MTW is a type of wire that is quite simple. It has one coating on it. It's polyvinyl chloride, PVC. It's extremely useful inside of panels. It's extremely useful anywhere you've got to make tight bends, and just any control wire is probably going to end up being MTW wire. Even MTW has a lot of variations though. It can vary in many ways, including the number of conductors that are used, that are stranded or twisted together. There are several types of materials. The most common ones you're going to see are plain copper and tin coated copper. The tin coated copper is a little better conductor. It can take a little more current, and it also is less likely to corrode once you put it inside a bad environment. MTW is used throughout industry. It's probably the most common wire used, maybe with the exception of THHN, which we will talk about later. The insulation on the outside of the wire can vary in any shade, color, just about that you can think of. It has many color combinations, and a lot of times that's necessary just to keep track of which wire is which. When you've got 1,000 wires going from one place to another and they're all in the same conduit, and a conduit is the container. It's a piece of pipe that you put the wire inside of to protect it when you're going from one part of the system to another part of the system. But this stuff is amazing as to how many variations you can get in color and type. There are also multi-conductor wires. That is a single cable that has many separate conductors inside of it. Usually they are labeled in some way. In this particular case, we've got different colors, so we can tell the difference between the wires. If you look, you'll see there's probably 2 reds, 2 blues, 2 oranges, and so on. Typically though, one of those reds will have a black stripe or a white stripe. The orange may have a black or white stripe, so you can tell the difference. But usually identification is very clear once you look at the wire itself. The outside of the multi-conductors have an insulating protective layer on it, and if you look carefully below that, you can see that there is a foil lining just under the outside insulation. That is called a shield. And what that does, if you're carrying low voltage signals inside of those wires, you don't want extraneous signals coming in from outside. That shield, that aluminum or copper lining that is around all of those inner conductors, keeps out those stray signals so that you're not going to get bad signals. This graphic shows a little better how that shielding works, how it's on there. This particular one has a braided, well, on the outside it has a layer of protective insulation. Inside of that it has a stainless steel braided layer which protects the wire and acts as a shield, and below that there is also a foil layer which protects those wires from getting signals from outside. You'll see there are several wires inside of there, and there's this other stuff in there, and it looks like a piece of plastic rope. Well, that is called a filler. That keeps the wire round. It keeps its shape by using those fillers. When we actually hook the wire up though, we cut those fillers away.